When my husband died, people kept handing me things that required signatures, funeral approvals, probate acknowledgments, insurance disclosures. Every document arrived with soft voices and lowered eyes, as if paperwork itself had become sacred. I signed most things without reading twice. My mother started coming over every morning around 9. She watered plants that didn't need water, rearranged food in the refrigerator, answered phone calls before I could reach them. "You shouldn't have to think right now," she kept saying. At the time, it sounded like kindness. The insurance payout came 6 weeks later, just over $1 million. My husband had been meticulous before the cancer spread too far. Separate beneficiary account, fraud protections, verification procedures. He used to joke that banks trusted nobody, especially grieving widows. I barely touched the account. I couldn't even open his closet without sitting on the floor afterward. Money felt obscene beside the fact that he was gone. My younger sister, Lara, visited more often after the payout arrived, not to comfort me exactly, more like orbiting, asking indirect questions. "Are you staying in the house? Do you even want all that responsibility alone? You could travel now." My parents answered for me most of the time. One afternoon, maybe 3 months after the funeral, Laura posted a photo online holding champagne on a balcony overlooking the marina, sunlight across white railings. "New patio furniture still wrapped in plastic. Fresh start," the caption said. I remember staring at the picture too long because something about it felt familiar before I realized why. The building was expensive, extremely expensive. That night, my parents invited me to dinner. My father poured wine and talked through the meal like someone following a script too quickly. Eventually, he mentioned the condo situation with the careless confidence of a man who believed everyone already agreed. I looked up. "What condo situation?" A pause, tiny, but real. My mother set down her fork carefully. Lara needed stability. I thought they meant co-signing. "Maybe a down payment." Then my father said, "You'll still have plenty left." The room changed temperature. I asked him what he meant, and for the first time since my husband died, nobody rushed to comfort me. My father leaned back in his chair, calm, almost irritated. "We moved some money to help your sister secure the property before another buyer stepped in. Moved, like furniture." I remember hearing the refrigerator humming behind me. "That account requires my authorization." My mother looked exhausted suddenly, as though I were creating unnecessary difficulty. "You signed enough forms for us to help." I never approved that. Lara finally spoke from across the table without even looking guilty. "She needs a future. Your husband is gone." Then she took another sip of champagne, not metaphorically, actual champagne. They'd brought a bottle to dinner to celebrate her purchase. Something inside me didn't break dramatically. It just withdrew. I left before dessert. For 2 days, I convinced myself there had to be an explanation I'd missed through grief. Maybe temporary access. Maybe legal guardianship language buried somewhere in probate paperwork. Then I went through every document in my house. My husband had taught me how to organize financial records during his treatments, mostly because he was afraid I'd be overwhelmed later. I found signature copies, authorization dates, banking correspondence. The transfer authorization looked wrong immediately. My signature leaned slightly upward at the end. Always had. The form dipped downward. The wire itself was enormous. Nearly $950. Zeros. 00 transferred directly into the escrow account connected to Laura's condo purchase. I sat there until morning with papers spread across the dining table, not crying, just awake. The next week, my parents started calling constantly. Their tone had shifted from casual to defensive. "It's family money now. You're alone. You don't need all of it. Don't make this ugly." That last one stayed with me because ugly had already happened. They just meant visible. I stopped answering. Instead, I requested archived transaction records from the bank, then signature verification history, then login locations attached to the beneficiary account. The employee helping me became noticeably quieter halfway through the appointment. "Would you like to speak with fraud operations?" she asked carefully. I said yes. By then I already knew. The forged authorization had been submitted during the week I was sedated after collapsing at home from exhaustion. My mother had temporary access to my documents. My father handled the bank meetings because "she can barely function right now" had apparently become persuasive. They had mistaken grief for permanent helplessness. 3 days later, I walked into the bank carrying one manila envelope. The branch manager recognized me immediately. I placed the documents on his desk: signature comparisons, hospital discharge records, wire authorization copies, timestamp discrepancies. My voice sounded unfamiliar to me. Flat, precise, run a wire trace. He opened the folder, read silently, then stood up without finishing the conversation. That was the moment everything stopped belonging to the family and started belonging to systems. Compliance officers appeared, not dramatically, quietly. One introduced herself and asked whether I would consent to filing a fraud escalation report involving possible forged beneficiary instructions and interstate transfer review. The language itself felt cold enough to breathe. Phones started ringing behind closed doors. Someone used the phrase federal hold. No one asked whether I wanted to keep this private. By evening, the condo escrow account had been flagged pending investigation. My father called 21 times that night. I didn't answer. Laura finally left a voicemail crying that I was ruining her future over paperwork. Paperwork, the same thing they thought grief had made me too weak to understand. Months later, the investigation was still active. Lawyers spoke more than family did. My parents stopped framing themselves as generous and started framing themselves as misunderstood. I never heard an apology that wasn't attached to self-protection. The strangest part was realizing the money mattered less than the permission they'd given themselves. Somewhere along the line, they decided my husband's death had downgraded my authority over my own life. That was the real theft. The last letter I received from the bank arrived on a gray Thursday morning. Federal hold. Active. I read it alone at the kitchen counter. No celebration followed. No sense of victory. My husband was still dead. My family was still my family. But for the first time since the funeral, nobody was speaking over me anymore.